Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. If you're new to woodworking and you plan to use the miter joint, whether in a case or flat, you're going to need a way to strengthen it. And the spline miter joint is one of the best ways to do that. You need a good clamping system, and that's what I'm going to show you. I'm Rob Cosman, and welcome to my shop. We make it our job to help take your woodworking to the next level. If you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, which will alert you whenever we release a new video. Anytime we use a new tool or technique, we'll leave a description down below so that make it easier for you to find. All right, let's get back to work. We recently showed these jigs in a video we did on tips and tricks, and have had numerous requests on how we made them. I'm going to walk you through that, but here's what we're talking about. If you're using a flat miter, which is perhaps one of the most common joints, getting that properly clamped so that you get a nice tight fit. Of course, it has to be properly prepared, but getting that clamped is really difficult, as well as clamping a miter on a case like this. But if you do it right, it'll come out perfect like that. Now, here's the jigs we use. They're not terribly difficult, but there's a few things that may make it easier for you. This one is what we use on a case miter, held in place, clamped across the width like this. And this is what we use on a flat miter. Again, held in place and clamped across the width of the joint. Really easy to do. You want to make them out of good hardwood because they need to be fairly robust. But there's a couple of other little tips that I'm going to give you that'll make it so that you almost guaranteed success when you use them. All right, let's go. Let's do the case miter first. So when you put this together, what you need is to have force coming directly through the middle of the joint. And that's very difficult to do. Now, there's been things in the past where you could glue blocks on. The problem is that it creates a lot of extra work, and there's always the potential for damage when you're removing them, even though they typically used to use a piece of paper in between. This is a lot less work. So we've got a piece of wood like this, and we're going to have the force come right through. Actually, I'm going to draw it because that's too short. Right through the middle of this flat spot. And as I mentioned, we want the force to come right through the middle of the joint. So if we line up those two like this, that should tell us approximately where we want to place our clamp. Then we'd simply measure this so it's the same on both sides, and then we need to clamp these two pieces in place. Now, if your inside of your case is going to be exposed, and you're going to want to have some kind of a clamp or some kind of a block in there to protect your work from the other part of the clamp. Now you do the same thing on the opposite side, but on this side you've got to run your clamp the other way, or else they're going to interfere with each other. You're going to have it the same distance from the end of the joint. Clamp that like so. Now what that will allow you to do is reach across with your third clamp, and as you apply pressure, it's going to be transferred through the middle of the joint, and it'll help pull that together. And that'll close your joint nice and tight, perfect alignment. We've got sandpaper that we've glued to the inside of this clamp in order to keep that from moving under the weight of the clamps, because on something like this I would probably have a clamp here, a clamp in the middle, and a clamp out on this end. And you don't need clamps quite this big to hold it in place, but you definitely want something that's going to prevent it from moving. So here's what we're going to do, make some of these. I'm going to make them out of some little bigger stock so that I can use them on larger projects. So let's draw this out, using this as a reference. So we're going to keep this as thick as we can. The thicker this is, the larger the landing pad that you have for your clamp. So we'll come in here and draw a 45 from the end of this. Now, If we wanted to, we could put a little more material on this side, which would prevent this from breaking off. That's looks rather weak, so let's come in here and back this off, maybe right about there. We also want it fairly long here too, because it allows us to get the clamp up here out of the way of the clamp that we're using to stretch across the joint. So let's come up to about there. Now, the farther in here we go, the more clamping space we have, but then we reduce the strength of the joint because we're reducing this dimension. So let's come right to about there. So now we've got to go over to the table saw, and we'll make this cut first, and then we'll make this cut with the piece standing on its edge. Okay, first thing I want to do is get these two edges parallel. I just ran them over the jointer. Now I've got to remove my splitter because it won't fit in my throat plate in order to make that angled cut. Okay, bring that all the way over to 45. We'll just sight down there. Drop the height a little. That's what we want. Now we'll stand that up, cut it like this, slice off right up to there. And then our waste falls to the outside. Okay, I've got the splitter back in. I'm just going to set this for the right height. Top of the cutting circle, right where we want it. And then just line this up by eye. We want to cut on the outside of the mark. Okay, now just use my combination square. So the halfway mark, that almost comes out right to the point. Now every time I use these, I'll know where the force is. Now I've got some sanding belts that I bought at an auction one time. They don't fit anything that I use, but it's good cloth-backed adhesive, and it's great for a task like this. I'm going to glue it on with regular glue. May as well cut them now. It makes it a little bit easier to work with. May as well do both of these at the same time. We can actually clamp them against each other. You can always just go out and get a sanding belt. I'd use it new, and that way you can be sure that it's going to grab well. I'm using 220 grit, which is probably fine. I wouldn't want it too coarse, just in case it marks the surface, although I don't think there's much risk of that happening. sure there's no, it's going to be easier to spread the glue on the flat wood surface instead of the sandpaper that's not flat. Make sure you got glue on all the outside edges. We don't end up having stuff that starts to peel. Now I'm just going to put some masking tape to hold that in place. So we can align it and clamp it together. Now we just put those together. Okay, well that's dry and we'll go to work on our flat miter clamps. Okay, now for the flat miter. These are considerably easier, not that the other ones were hard. I'm going to measure this 3.5, so 1.75 inches. So we want the line of force to come right through there. And on our clamp, it's going to be in the center of the pad. We've already got a line there, so we'd want that clamped right there. A nice step with having these, we can make these as long as we want, so we can easily clamp back here, and then there's nothing interfering with our clamp that goes across the joint. So I got a couple pieces of poplar. Actually, we can make one set out of this. We'll cut this in half, and then we'll come in and we'll cut that, we'll lay out for that notch. Actually, we can do that right now. So we'll give ourselves lots of room. Again, we don't want it to be too deep. The deeper it is, the weaker the clamp's going to be. I don't think we need any more than that for a pad for the clamp. This is 17.5, so 8 3/4. I'll cut that one and trace it onto this. We can use these ones over at the bandsaw. Okay, we can do this by eye. Cut it in half first. And then we'll just cut out this. And just so that they're the same, we'll go ahead draw these in and then cut those ones out as well. And just before I glue those ones, I'm going to clean up the bottom where we're going to glue on the sandpaper. Wrong way. Easy to be fooled. It looks like the grain was running this way, but not always the way it looks. Now that strip that we cut off was just perfect for this. I'd love to be able to say I planned that. Oh, it's close anyway. I'm just going to glue those on and trim it off later. It's easier than trying to get it exact. Same idea. We glue these on and then it doesn't slip on us when we're using the clamps. Okay, once out of the clamps, trim that excess off. You don't want that catching and pulling off the rest of it. Make sure there's no hardened glue on the bottom. You don't want that leaving a mark in the surface of the wood. Now, put your marks on there so you know where the line of force is, and the last thing I do is write on it what it is, so I don't end up finding it in a year's time, throwing it out because I can remember. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. Now, I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the icon with the plane and the chisel, it'll take you to our website, introduce you to all of our tools that we actually manufacture right here, as well as our workshops, both in person and online. Good luck.